Hi, this is Tim Von Rueden with cgcookie.com, and in today's tips tutorial, I will be going through the tips to becoming a master concept artist, and these techniques are used by most, if not all, the concept artists in the industry today. This will be covering the tips from starting to finishing a piece off. Okay then, let's get started. So before me is a blank canvas, and while I could just go in and start drawing, it's better to have some reference that you can work off of for anatomy, perspective, color, whatever it might be. So to find some reference, you could go to a search engine and just type it in there, or you could go to a existing art website and find an image that is similar to what you want to do. So for me, I want to do a creature image, and I know of one that I can use. And you also want to make sure you can find an image you can feel comfortable covering enough to call it your own. So I'm going to go ahead and just save this image out. Then I'm going to grab it and then open it with Photoshop. And there we go. So now there's two things I can do with this. So I can either copy this and then paste it in the other, or work directly on this. But I'm going to go ahead and copy this and then put it in the first file that we had. So I'm just going to make it fit the canvas. Don't worry about stretching. The less that you're directly copying from the original image, the better. Yeah, that looks fine. Okay, so right here I could either lower the opacity on this and then just draw right over it using the proportions as my own. Or what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the opacity all the way up and then just work right on the picture. So you may have noticed that some of the images you grab from the internet have a watermark or signature. And we definitely want to take care of that right away because we don't want any copyright infringement. That would be embarrassing. So I'm going to grab a brush that is similar to what this artist used, and I'm going to just cover up that signature. And this may take some time depending on how large the watermark or signature is. There we go. So it takes a little precision, but you definitely want to make sure you cover the entire thing up, leaving no trace of the artist that drew on this before. There we go. So I'm going to merge that layer down. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw right on this, and this might take a few hours, so I'm going to go ahead and cut the video and then I'll come back after I've put in a few hours of good rendering work, and we'll go from there. And we're back. And this is the result of some different techniques I was using, some different brushes. I was using some texture packs from online. And then after all that, you may have noticed I put on a filter or 5. And you just want to do that to add an instant realism effect, especially adding a texture filter that really can add some depth to your picture. So from here, you want to go ahead and start doing some overlays. And the best way to do this is with the gradient tool. So I'm going to make sure that I'm doing this on a new layer, and I'm going to change that layer type to overlay. So now I'm going to go over to my color picker and choose two colors that I can overlay onto this picture. So now when choosing the colors, I want to choose complementary colors that will reflect and boost and enhance the colors in your piece. So what that means is you can either choose a red and green, a blue and orange, or a yellow and purple. But I wouldn't use red and green because that reminds you of the holidays and we don't want that. And you could do yellow and purple, but if you look in the industry, use what they're using. It's the blue and orange, and you can see it everywhere, and that's because it works every time. So I'm going to choose a nice blue, and I'm also going to be choosing a very subtle orange. So with my gradient tool selected, I want to make sure that I'm on the first gradient type, not the second one, because that will only get a blue overlay. And we don't want that. We want a nice color combination. So then from here, I just go into my piece and kind of play with how the gradient looks and figure out which is the best way that I can add this in. So I'm liking something like this because the blues are kind of bringing the green and that life out of that grass, where the oranges are bringing that background color to life. So I'm going to keep it somewhere around here. And I'm going to change the opacity a little bit. So I'm going to either change it to like 30, or I'm just going to boost it up right there, something like that. So you want to make sure it's subtle enough that people aren't just noticing the color overlay. And then once we have this all set in place, then we can start thinking about adding a depth of field. And pretty much what that means is we're just going to blur a whole bunch of stuff and make you focus on one particular area. So I'm going to go ahead and first merge this overlay layer down into the creature layer, so we're only working on one layer. Then I'm going to go to Filter, and I'm going to go to Blur, and I'm going to do a radial blur. So for this kind of a blur, you can either do a spin blur or a zoom blur, but I'm going to go ahead and do a zoom, and that'll kind of make the edges more blurry and then less blurry as you get toward the center of the image. And this is a great tool to use if you're not feeling up to drawing a specific area, or if you kind of want to cover up some lesser quality areas in your piece. There we go. So you can see how near the edges it's a little bit more blurred. And that's kind of just playing off how the real eye works, and how at the edges, if you're looking at a picture from the center, the edges are a little bit more blurry. So it's just adding a little bit more of that realism effect that we're trying to go for. So once we have that blur inset, then we can go ahead and add a rim light. And if you don't know what a rim light is, it's pretty much showing off that you understand a 3-point lighting system, and you understand how to add in that sharp contrast rim light. So what you can do is you can just grab a color and just work your way around the outside of the creature. You want to make sure that you understand where the light would be hitting. So since I'm doing it from his left side, I want to make sure that I'm following his left side of the body. This is another one of those things that you don't have to be too subtle about, because the more intense, actually I'm not even sure why people do this. I think it looks very interesting though. And also this will help separate your subject matter from the background. So there. And if I want, I could even do a little hue saturation to this and turn that saturation up. Maybe that lightness somewhere around there. So now we have a lighting that is coming directly from the left side, and it's hitting him so hard that the color is just that solid blue. So once again, I'm going to merge that layer down. And this is at the point where I feel confident enough that I could start to do the finishing touches. And to do that, you want to go to Image, Adjustment, and you can either go to Levels or Brightness and Contrast. But for him, I'm going to go to Levels. And pretty much, I'm just going to spike up the darks, and then I'm going to really enhance those lights. And you don't want to overdo it, but you want to do it just enough that you give a clean and polished look to your piece. And of course, after you're all done, you have to re-sign it. Or not re-sign, because of course this is your own work. So I'm going to go ahead and just put it in the corner. And resize it. And you want to be courteous enough to make it in an area that people could just cover it up if they needed to use this as a reference for their own piece. And lastly, you're going to want to post this on art websites or Facebook, and you'll get a lot of feedback, and you don't have to actually take it. Just know that they don't understand as much as you do, so you don't have to really consider what they're talking about. So this is the final result. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something.